All right, we're going to do a natural light shoot, and I want to talk about setting up the camera first because it seems like, well, natural light, that would be such an easy thing to shoot, but there's a couple of things that you can do in the camera that are going to make your shoot a success. First, what we're going to talk about is setting your white balance. Now, you can set a custom white balance, and that'll make things a lot easier too. But if you don't want to set a custom white balance, there's a trick you can do on most Nikon and Canon cameras for sure, and that is to use live view to set your white balance. You can actually go in here and turn it on to where, just like you would with a point and shoot, you actually see what's going on inside the viewfinder. And then what you can do is, while it's live, you hold down the white balance button and just scroll through your different white balances, and you'll be able to find out really quickly which one looks the best. So if you don't have a great card, you don't want to set up a really good custom white balance and all that, which of course you'll learn during this series, but you can just kind of fake it, and it does a pretty darn good job by using live view. So set your camera to live view, point it at your subject. Try all the different, go through, just scroll all through the different looks, and it'll change live. So it's very, very easy to do. All right, let's talk about your camera settings. So we're shooting in natural light. Now, depending on how much light you have, you might be able to get away with shooting at the very lowest ISO. I like to shoot on a Nikon or a Canon at a 200 ISO. Now, what f-stop are we going to use? Well, the f-stop we're probably going to use is we're going to be shooting kind of a fashion-y look. And so I want the background behind my subject to be kind of out of focus. So I'm going to try to shoot with probably like an f4, maybe f2.8, something like that. Now, what's great about this is that that number is going to put the background completely out of focus. And depending on how long your telephoto lens is, that's going to make a difference too. I tend to work always at the other end of the lens, like 200 millimeters. So let's just kind of go over this. We're going to be at a very, very wide open aperture, like f4, maybe f2.8. And by the way, if you do that, you're going to need to make sure that you focus carefully on your subject's eyes, right on the eye. Don't focus on their nose. Make sure you focus right in their eye. That way everything's in focus. Because when you're working at a shallow depth of field like this, the chances for something to go wrong in the focus are very large if you don't nail that eye. So make sure you're right in on the eye. Number two, we're going to set the white balance. We're going to do it using live view. And if we don't do it using live view, we're kind of in a shady area here. So we're in the shade. You could try shade, but I think shade's going to be a little maybe too yellow for you. Maybe try cloudy. And cloudy is a great one that I use outdoors as well. When I'm shooting outdoors, most of the time I'm set to cloudy. So that'll also probably work in here. We're kind of in the overhang of the studio in an outdoor area, but there is a fake wall and a fake living room because it's studio. It's all fake. So here's what we're going to do. We have a professional model with us. Vanessa's going to be working with us. Hi, Vanessa. That's her over there by the door. Now, so part of this is where do we position our subject? Well, I don't want to position her right in front of the door because normally there'll be a lot of light just streaming in and it's going to be kind of harsh. Now, we know that we're going to get softer and more wrapping light by moving her back just a little bit. That way she's not rightly in the direct beam of the sun. Now, during this series, we also talk about how to diffuse when you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice and the light's just beaming in. Don't worry about it. We'll cover that as well. But in this case, there's light here and it's better here. The quality from here to here is much better. So now, what I want to do is, I like to try to get up at a higher stance. Luckily, there's some stairs over here, but if not, we use a thing called a ladder cart. It basically is just a cart that lets us move our equipment, and when we're done, it turns into a ladder. And you know what we say? It's not just a ladder, it's not just a cart, it's a ladder cart. So you can take and just go up a few steps and it changes your perspective on shooting your subject. Now, what are we going to have to worry about? There's going to be one key thing we have to worry about. I'm going to take a couple of test shots of Vanessa and I'll show you what the problem's going to be. And I'm going to come around the other side here and get up on the stairs so I'm shooting down just a little bit at an angle here. Again, if I didn't have these stairs, I would be shooting from the ladder cart. All right, let me go ahead and take a couple of test shots here real quick. All right, so let's just get a couple. Very nice. All right, great. And let me just, okay, let's take a quick look at what I've got. All right, so the thing that I have to really worry about here, and I'm seeing this problem, is clipping the highlights. Because we're working with natural light, and sometimes, especially in a room with all this white in it, you're going to worry about clipping the highlights. Now, what that means is there's going to be parts of this photograph that are not going to print at all. If you actually make a print, and I hope that you do, if you actually make a print, parts of that print are going to be completely blown out. There'll be no pixels there. It'll just be the white paper it's on. That's very, very easy to do when you're shooting in natural light situations. So here's what we do. You take a test shot like I just did, and you look on the back of the camera. Make sure, no matter what brand of camera that you use, that you have your highlight warnings turned on. So they will actually blink at you. When you see the photograph, you'll actually see it blinking like a strobe light. Then look at that image and decide, the part of this image that you see blinking, is it important? if it is on your subject, it is critically important that you have to deal with that. Now, if it's like a window behind your subject or something, you're probably not going to be able to have to worry about that. So is it an area of important detail? If that's what it is, you have to change for it. Here's what we do. You take a test shot, you see it's blinking. You're going to use exposure compensation on your camera. You're going to actually go in and say, well, my camera thought this was the proper exposure, because that's what it's doing. We're shooting in aperture priority mode at f4, all right? So in aperture priority mode, the camera's going to go, I think this is the proper exposure. If it's wrong, and your subject's face has blown out highlights and things, then you have to override what the camera thinks is right. You have to go, okay, well, you shot this, the camera thinks this is right, but I can look and see I've got blown out highlights. So you as the photographer have to try it again. What you're going to do is you're going to use exposure compensation to knock down your exposure by minus 1/3, 1/3 of a stop, and then try again. So let me do that. I'm just going to hold the button, I'm going to go to minus 1/3, and I'm going to try the shot again. So let me go ahead and take another shot here, Vanessa. I'm getting just a little tiny bit of clipping. Now the clipping isn't really on her now, it's kind of on the wall beside her, so I can decide whether I think that's important or not. But if it's still clipping, then what I would do is I just knocked it down 1/3. I need to knock it down to minus 0.7. So 2/3 of a stop, something like that. Okay, here we go. 7/10 of it, you know what I mean. All right, let me take a couple of more shots. When you get back in Photoshop and try to retouch this, you're going to find out that it's going to be kind of hard to do it. Sometimes you'll be able to use the recovery slider to bring back those lost highlights, but sadly there'll be times where it just doesn't. And if you have it on your subject's face or on their skin, the shot is toast. Again, a couple things to keep in mind. Make sure that your shutter speed is above 1/160th of a second. Because if not, there's a good chance your shots are going to be soft, or if not soft, they're going to be actually blurry. So that's something to keep in mind. When you look through there, make sure. If it falls below 1/160th of a second, what can you do? You've got to raise your ISO. At that point, you would raise your ISO from 200 to 400. Then go and take another test shot. Just look through the camera, hold the shutter button halfway down, and see if it's moved up. You need to, ideally, in a daylight situation, I'd love to see you at 1/125th of a second. If you can get to there, you can pretty much be sure, as long as you're holding the camera fairly steady, that your shots are going to be nice and sharp.